What's going on, guys? Welcome back, and we are fast approaching the end of The Bad Batch, which is pretty hard to believe, but we've got a new chunk of episodes to talk about, so I'm here to give my thoughts on them, starting with Episode 9, The Harbinger, which, as many people, including myself, had predicted is the Ventress episode, as it is confirmed that she was Fennec's mysterious contact at the end of the previous episode, and she finds the Bad Batch on Pabu, informs them of the truth about M counts, starts testing Omega for potential force sensitivity, and hits the road after getting into a bit of a scuffle with the Batch. Being totally transparent, this is by far my least favorite episode of this season. To preface this, I've never read the book Dark Disciple, nor do I plan to. I've also never been the biggest fan of the character Asajj Ventress. I thought she was decent in the Clone Wars with a conceptually interesting character arc, but it was never given the time to become fully fleshed out. So when she made her grand appearance in the trailer for The Bad Batch Season 3, I didn't care until I heard this might be another example of one of these classic canon retcons that have become synonymous with the Star Wars shows at this point, but one of the writers said that everything would make sense, and this show would align with the events of Dark Disciple. Well, now that we've seen the episode, I can confirm that that isn't true. The only explanation for Ventress's nonsensical return from death is that she's got a few lives left, whatever the hell that means. I've seen people theorizing that this has something to do with Night Sister magic. Since when were the Night Sisters able to resurrect fully cognizant living beings and not just mindless zombies? That's the problem. These are questions I don't want to be asking in The Bad Batch, a show that has nothing to do with that. I understand this is a sequel series to the Clone Wars, so logically it makes sense that stories and characters from that show would be continued into this one, but Ventress feels so out of place here. She isn't relevant to the story of these characters. They don't even know who she is until they look her up on Google. For the most part, this show has done a great job of implementing fan service and character cameos. For example, Saw Gerrera has only made 2 brief appearances in this show, but both of them served a purpose thematically and pushed the characters forward. Similarly, Cad Bane shows up in the episode directly preceding this one, does what he needs to do narratively, and hits the road without overstaying his welcome. But here, Ventress doesn't do anything that any other living Force user couldn't have done. The Bad Batch already know a Force user. Gunji, I guess you could say he's a youngling, so maybe he doesn't know all the details surrounding midichlorian counts. Okay, fair enough. But they know Rex. Couldn't Rex just ask Ahsoka about midichlorian counts? I'm certain she would know what those are. Maybe she is undercover and can't communicate with anyone. But based on the events of the Ahsoka novel, that seems like a bunch of bullshit. Oh wait, the events of the Ahsoka novel aren't canon anymore according to Tales of the Jedi. See the issue here? I'm not going to give this retcon a pass just because I don't have a personal connection to Dark Disciple. I was angry as hell when they threw out the entire motivation of Thrawn's character in the Ahsoka series. I'm sick of seeing them discard pre-established canon to fit their own story. If they wanted to bring Ventress back, I guess I can understand that, but do it somewhere else where you have time to explain her survival. Not here, in a story that has no relevancy to her whatsoever. This feels like a counterintuitive attempt at fan service, because clearly they wanted this to appeal to fans of Dark Disciple, otherwise they wouldn't have said that it aligns with the events of that book. But they lied. And as far as I can tell, fans of Dark Disciple are not happy about this. What were they trying to do here? I suppose this episode wasn't entirely devoid of merit. I loved this moment of Hunter, Wrecker, and Crosshair standing together as the Bad Batch theme blasts in the background, representing the unity of this once broken brotherhood. But even that couldn't save it. This episode is functional if viewed in isolation, but I can't do that. I have to acknowledge the world-breaking repercussions of something like this. I've been of the belief that this show has been as good as it is because of the lack of Dave Filoni's involvement, but this feels like a Filoni move, like he popped his head into the writer's room and said, "Hey, Jennifer, I need you to bring Ventress back." And she was like, okay, wrote in a quick half-assed line alluding to her survival and moved on telling the story she actually wanted to tell, because everything picks up again after this point. Moving on, we've got another 2 episodes that released at the same time, Identity Crisis and Point of No Return, which is interesting because these episodes feel far less like a 2-parter than episodes 6 and 7 of this season did. But nonetheless, the 10th episode reestablishes the same tone that the first few episodes of this season had, as Emery takes over from Nala Se as the lead scientist on Project Necromancer and learns the dark truth that they are imprisoning and experimenting on children, scared children who just want to go home. And all she's able to do by the end is show them the same act of compassion she showed Omega by giving one of them a doll. Similar to these children, Emery still feels trapped by Hemlock, but we can see she's starting to realize that what she's doing is wrong. Similar to other characters in this show like Crosshair, her transformation has not been immediate, but it will inevitably happen by the end of the show. And I loved a lot of the subtle moments in this episode, like when Hemlock accepts a holocall from Tarkin, who isn't even looking at him, so preoccupied by other things that Hemlock is utterly meaningless to him. But once he confronts Hemlock about the funding he's been taking for his projects on Tantus, he offers to help, clearly trying to swoop in and take credit for Hemlock's work, just like he does later on with director Krennic's Stardust project. After being pressured by Tarkin, Hemlock contacts the clone operative, who tells him that he had to extract information from the Trandoshan, alluding to the fact that Sid may have tried to protect the Bad Batch. I also appreciate that we saw the operative's process of tracking down the Bad Batch on Pabu. He had to follow several leads, eventually leading him to Fee, where he was able to deduce their location from the various coordinates on her ship's computer. If this was a bad show, he would have just suddenly appeared on Pabu with no explanation. But the writers cared enough to show us the process of getting from point A to point B. And things escalate quickly from there, as everything we had feared would happen since we first saw Pabu back in Season 2 finally comes to pass. The Empire begins invading the island, searching for Omega, destroying the Marauder and severely injuring Wrecker in the process. This episode was just subversion after subversion, as every attempt by the Bad Batch to escape is thwarted by the Empire, and Omega makes the selfless choice to allow herself to be captured in order to save the people of Pabu. But she trusts Crosshair to plant a tracker on the ship that takes her away, and in another shocking twist, Crosshair misses the shot. I absolutely loved this, because as I've said countless times, this show doesn't rush things. It wouldn't make sense for Crosshair to succeed at this point in the story, because it isn't time for his moment yet. He still needs to confront the trauma from what he experienced on Tantus, and address his insecurities and fears about losing his family again. Once he does that, his moment will come by the end of this season. And this show has done something I thought to be impossible. It's executed the young character getting kidnapped by the bad guys trope several times without it feeling boring or repetitive. There are several Star Wars shows to have done this. The Mandalorian and Obi-Wan Kenobi are the ones that immediately jump to mind, but this is the only one to have done it successfully. When Omega was captured by Cad Bane back in Season 1, it was totally unexpected, serving as a wake-up call for the characters that they were in a far more dire situation than they thought. At the end of Season 2, it was their worst fears being realized after they lost one of their own and Sid betrayed them. And they were able to subvert that at the beginning of this season by having Omega escape through her own ingenuity and the help of Crosshair, rather than them needing to rescue her. And now it shows how far her character has come, that she is willing to confront her fears for the betterment of everyone. And the fact that Crosshair is willing to go along with her plan shows how much the bond of trust between them has grown over the course of this season. Now, the last episode on the agenda for now is episode 12, Juggernaut, which is mostly dedicated to setting the stage for what will be the final arc of this series, as Omega is returned to Mount Tantus, and she tries to reason with Emery, before Hemlock introduces her to the other specimens involved in Project Necromancer, and Crosshair tells the rest of the Bad Batch that the one way they might be able to locate Tantus is by capturing none other than his old boss, Vice Admiral Rampart. After a pretty fun chase scene involving turbo tanks, the Bad Batch are able to capture Rampart, who reveals to them that he doesn't actually know the coordinates of Tantus, but if they work together, they might be able to find another way. Both Rampart and the clones were manipulated by Palpatine. Palpatine used the inhibitor chips to incriminate the clones and framed Rampart for the destruction of Kamino, all in service of his greater goals of pushing forward the Stormtrooper initiative. So I like the dynamic they're building up here, and I look forward to seeing how it will continue into these last few episodes. Perhaps the Bad Batch and Rampart will be able to find some common ground despite their differences. But that's pretty much it for my thoughts on the latest 4 episodes of The Bad Batch Season 3. Episode 9 was a major dip in quality in my opinion, but everything's kicked into high gear again with these latest 3 episodes, and I have complete confidence they'll be able to pull off a satisfying conclusion with the last 3 episodes of this season, which will be what I talk about in my next video on the show. That's kind of sad for me to say, but I look forward to talking about them, giving my overall thoughts on the show, and hopefully making a part 2 of my Crosshair music analysis. But what did you guys think of these episodes? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Just whatever your thoughts are. Please let me know them all in the comments below. And of course, as always, I hope you guys have a great day. Take care. Bye.